Hi everybody, my name is Samantha Ellinger and I'm with FedScoop TV. We're here at the 2016 Red Hat Government Symposium and I'm talking to Susie Adams, CTO of Microsoft Federal. Susie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question for you is kind of looking back over this administration, what strides have really been made when it comes to open source policy, and looking ahead, what do you see in the future?
Sure. So I think, early on in the administration in the first term, open source seemed almost synonymous with open government, where it's going to be free. Everybody thought that even though they were semi-familiar with open source, it just seemed like it was a great thing to do because it was free. And I think what agencies have learned to do now is, and what they've done over the past 8 years, is actually to kind of take a step back and realize that it's not open source for open source sake. They actually have to go out and look at the right tool for the job and be able to use, and apply the best open source project to a particular business problem, or whatever software it is to a particular business problem. And so I think that's the biggest thing I think agencies have really started to look at, is just really looking at the right tool for the right job, and then leveraging open source as one of the tools in their toolbox, right, and doing so responsibly.
Great. And turning a little bit to an issue that's been on everybody's minds lately, cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is a preeminent IT concern for federal agencies. How can open source actually help with security?
So what's interesting is I do remember kind of the mantra where open source is inherently more secure just because there are more eyes on it. And I think what everybody's learned is that any software can be secure or unsecure. Right? It really doesn't matter what the business model is to acquire the software. It really depends on how the software was written and does it have the right, security capabilities in it. And so now I think, from an open source perspective, of course, having more responsible people look at source code is always a better thing, right? So open source can be super secure if done in the right way. And so I think what agencies have started to do is look at open source and actually look at it to make sure that it is secure, as opposed to just assume it's secure because it's an open source solution that happens to be in an open source tool. And so I think it's really just been a broader learning from the agency's perspective that everything can be secure, everything can be unsecure. You really have to do your due diligence and do your homework to make sure that the right security capabilities are in place.
That makes sense. Sort of related to cybersecurity is the issue of IT modernization and the need to modernize. Legislation's making its way through Congress. This has been a huge point of discussion with Tony Scott, something he's really emphasized. As agencies look to modernize their systems in the future, how can maybe open source benefit or facilitate that?
Well, I think one of the things that open source really does is give you more tools in the toolbox. Right? It really has been this phenomenon where developers are going out and building and innovating, right, in mass numbers. And so being able to have more tools in your toolbox is always a good thing when it comes to IT modernization, right? Deciding which tool is best to help your agency get to that next step. Right. What I think the other thing I think it really does is open source has the ability to run on a variety of different platforms now. So take, for example, on Azure, we support open source across the board. We just announced Red Hat support, that we can actually host RHEL. And in fact, I think it's 6 out of every 10 virtual machines that get spun up inside of our Azure platform today is actually Linux based. Right, so if you look at kind of the options that are available to you now have grown exponentially as well. So it's not just from a plain software perspective. You can now run it on a variety of platforms, which really gives the agencies choice, which is something I think before they kind of felt like they were in vendor locked in. They had vendor lock-in a lot. Now they will have choice as to where to run that software as well.
Great. And talking again about how we can really leverage the open source movement, what other areas such as collaboration, mobility, speed could maybe benefit from using more open source?
Well, I think when we look at how code is just being developed today, it's all really a DevOps world, and from a DevOps perspective, it's all about an innovative process to put code out. And so when you look at the speed at which that happens, that alone, right, will help agencies modernize more quickly instead of the long waterfall types of approaches to building solutions and modernizing systems. Right, you now have this DevOps, right, way of doing things that allows you to iterate very quickly. and get solutions out very quickly at less cost. So you can actually fail. You could say they were talking today, fail fast, right?
Yeah.
Which
Fail
may
fast
or
to
may not be
eventually succeed.
to eventually
Yeah.
succeed, which really isn't a great thing in many ways, but it is really what can happen. You can try a lot of things. There's a ton of new technology around the containers, right, allowing you to quickly try out new things, right, in a much more expedient fashion than you could before. And I think that's really what's going to benefit agencies as they work through modernizing their infrastructure.
Great. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for watching. I'm Samantha Ellinger with FedScoop TV.